We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful. Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Well, we started season 4 by wondering whether it would be like series 4 of Friends, Rocky 4, or indeed the 4th series of The Sopranos. Well, I can safely say, Greg, it's been more Rocky than Friends. On the show today, Greg has a new hero. Nick wants to talk about Charlie Gard. June is going to bang on about Brexit again. Oh, yeah. And Michelle is threatening to show us some pictures of herself. But first, it's me. Like millions, I was glued to the TV on Monday night watching Wills and Harry talk about their mum, Princess Diana, who died 20 years ago next month. And while the 90-minute documentary reminded us what an incredible mother she was, why did the princes, who've spent a lifetime demanding the privacy Diana never had, suddenly decide to share their innermost feelings about her with the nation? I get their need to honour their mother, but it wasn't long ago they were airing their issues around mental health in a series of highly publicised interviews. And here they are again, inviting us to feel their pain. The pain millions of us feel every day. My question is, should they have done? Should the man who is to be king and his brother really be bearing their souls on TV? Because that's what Diana did in that infamous Panorama interview, when she said there are 3 people in this marriage. Those words opened a door into Diana's private life that even death has never been able to close. And she regretted it. Maybe this documentary was an attempt by Wills and Harry to do what their mum did, to gain legitimacy by showing us their vulnerability. The princes say they won't ever speak so openly about their mum again. The real question is, should they have done it at all? Is it our future king's job to emote to his subjects? And will letting it all hang out emotionally be the hallmark of William's reign? Let's hope not. Because as essayist Walter Bagehot once said of the monarchy, its mystery is its life. We must not let in daylight upon magic.
So you said, should they have done the documentary? I would answer very simply, yes, that they should. I watched that show and I had a huge amount of respect for both the boys. They are somebody in such prominent public positions, and Diana was somebody who lots of people felt that they knew and lots of people felt that they loved. And what happened to William and Harry was tragic, to lose their mum. And I think it is incredibly brave to go out and actually be honest about what they've experienced and the pain. And I'm sure they've got multiple reasons for doing that, one of which is to keep the legacy of their mum alive, because they've got children now. Those children will never know Diana. And it's kind of talking about her, sharing the memories is a great thing for them to do as a family. And for everybody else, there's always been this appetite to talk to the boys about their mum and what happened and all the rest of it. They're trying to control that and do it on their terms. And I've got massive respect for them. And I think that what they did would have helped, to quote you, the millions of people that feel a similar pain, having lost their own mums or siblings or whatever. I've got nothing but respect for them for doing it.
Well, I mean, that's fine. You say that they did it to keep her legacy alive. Diana's legacy is still very much alive, whether they had done that or not. And I don't believe that doing a documentary was the way to honour her, if you like. But no, these are 2 guys, especially William, who has spent a lifetime railing against media intrusion. He said the only time he ever saw, on that documentary, he said the only time he ever saw his mum cry was as a result of media intrusion. And what he also said on that documentary is, you know, you have to be very, very careful of letting the media in, and he has been, because once you've let them in, you can't keep them out. And that's what Diana found when she did that interview with Martin Bashir, that Panorama interview. The world wanted to know her business permanently after that. But more practically, you know, I don't want our future king, as I just said there, emoting. The Queen has never in her entire life given an interview. She is the most respected of the royals. And she has suffered many tragedies, much pain, and it is inconceivable that she would do something like that. And this idea, you know, I think it was Little John said in his column this week that Diana popularised the cult of confession. She did. And after her death, people kind of lived through vicariously vicarious grief, other people's grief. And I don't think that's what the royals should be doing, and that's what struck me that this was doing.
Carol, you say the Queen. You're right, the Queen has never given an interview, but I want to take you back to the events that you mentioned some 20 years ago, which was the death of Diana. And many people thought that this was possibly as close to the tipping point as we've ever had with the royal family. Yeah. It was deemed that they weren't really responding to public grief. They didn't get the sense of the nation. They were closeted up in Balmoral. I sense that possibly that was the way of dealing with the boys, and it's not for me to comment what's right or wrong. But you say that you don't want a future king emoting to his subjects. Well, I put it to you, let me show you this. I think that is the current Queen emoting to her subjects.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
And just to sum up, before I allow the others in, I would say we belong to a different generation where we just expected kings and queens and senior army officers just to... The world has moved on. I've had the pleasure of meeting both William and Harry as part of that mental health campaign when they opened an academy that's owned by the radio company that I work for. I don't know them as well, William, as well as Greg does, but I was bowled over by what stunning young men they are. I accept your point. We don't want to see them every week. That is ridiculous. But up to this point, I'm still with them.
I mean, can I just answer that piece of film? We all know, us the media know, she was forced to do that. The Queen didn't want to do that. She was forced to respond to the public grief, to the flowers that were gathering outside. She didn't want to do that. That is not her way. And it's not the King or the Queen's job to emote in this way, to bear their soul. No. I don't want to feel their pain. I just want them to get on with their job. Does 2017 mean that everyone has to say what they feel emotionally? No.
Well, just to quickly add, and then I know, Greg, you want to comment. I totally agree with Nick and Michelle. I think that it's a different generation, and the work that William and Harry have done in terms of allowing young men to express the issues and the problems that they're experiencing should be completely commended. And I think William and Harry, Rio Ferdinand, Brendan Cox, Freddie Flintoff, even Jay-Z now is talking about their vulnerabilities as men. And we have so many issues regarding young men and suicide and depression, and actually what these young men are doing is leading the way for a new way of being. And much like Nick said, this is a new generation, and if these boys want to be relevant, then they have to be in touch with people, don't you think? Yeah.
I watched the documentary. No one would obviously talk about it. I watched it. I thought it was very good, actually. I mean, it was clearly a perspective. It was not an open, from both sides. And it was a perspective. I thought both the princes came across well. I thought William came across particularly well, given that he's the less charismatic of the two. Yeah. And I thought... But, I mean, when I think back to the death of Diana, what you remember of the two boys going to church that morning, and then the two boys walking behind
which
the
we now
cortege,
learn they were effectively bullied into doing.
And I think that's the value of it. I think that it puts all that into a perspective. And I think they also have said that this is it. This is it. They won't do it again. This is their account. They wanted something that talked about their mother. Yeah. And I thought, I mean, I did meet their mother at a lunch one day, and I mean, she loved being Princess Diana. She loved the publicity that went with it, and she loved all that. But she was, I watched the documentary, and I was quite surprisingly impressed by her. Yeah. In that documentary, I really thought, she did do some real things. I mean, the stuff on AIDS. When she
led the way on that.
Remember back in that. I mean, people wouldn't touch people with AIDS. Yeah. And she changed all that. Yeah. And I thought that was profound. You knew that before that documentary. But I mean, I did know that before.
But you both know that this was a sugar-coated version of the truth and the times and of Diana's life. But I think that
you've seen through the Suns. What do you expect them to say?
Well, no, I don't expect this, but it was a sugar-coated version of the truth. But also, the danger of them doing this is that they become like celebrities. You just mentioned a whole host of celebrities there. That's the danger when you do this sort of stuff, and then they're not relevant as royals
the
anymore.
stiff upper lip are gone, Carol.
Well, I don't
we
understand
need to
why
be able to
you're-
express our emotions,
men
and women.
Why would you resent anybody?
I don't resent it. I just don't think they should be doing it.
But why would you not think that somebody should use their platform for good? And we know, we've discussed it on this programme before, the rise of mental health issues and the stigma that does still surround it.
Yeah.
And we've all agreed that actually conversations about it are good. You know, the changes, the Heads Together stuff that the princes are doing is fantastic. They're using their platform for good on an issue that is incredibly serious. I don't see why you've got a problem with
Well,
it.
Carol is right. It's got to stop. We can't do any more. And I think, Greg, you said that they said that this will be it.
Yeah.
And
And
I
they
sense
said that.
and that must be it, because otherwise some of
Yeah,
the
agreed.
majesty, small m, will be lost. I agree with you there,
Well,
Carol.
can I just answer the mental health thing? You know, there was a hysterical overreaction to their involvement in that. And actually, many experts have come forward since, the professor at the Royal Institute of Psychiatry for a start, and said people must not confuse anxiety and grief with mental health. Mental illness. It's not a mental illness.
No.
And to pretend that it is. And I don't think Prince William having this stilted conversation with Lady Gaga changes
Carol,
anything.
can I just show a clip which, to me, shows that they have given it a lot of thought? This is what William said when he first got engaged to Kate. So let's have a look.
That's kind of almost why I have been waiting this long, is I wanted to give her a chance to see and to back out if she needed to, before it all got too much, because, you know, I'm trying to learn from lessons done in the past, and I just wanted to give her the best chance to settle in and see what happens the other side.
And I'm also glad that I've had the time to sort of to grow and understand myself more as well. So hopefully,
Does that mean I've done well?
hopefully do a good job. Yes.
Good.
They are measured. They think this stuff through. And I don't think this is something that was just decided on the huff. They really understand how important it is.
I don't think they did on the hoof at all. But let's not forget, it was only a year ago that William was getting a lot of flack from people because he wasn't doing enough royal duties. He was accused of being
You get
lazy.
flack from the press.
Yeah, well, okay. He was getting flack. Whatever. He was getting flack for not doing enough royal duties.
Right, it's like you.
Doing a handful of shifts at the air ambulance and spending millions on his mansions. And now all that's gone away. Now suddenly he's St. William. And I just think this is a dangerous road to go down. Because what now makes them royals? What distinguishes them from celebrities in the future?
Well, they were born into the royal
Carol,
family.
I just want to come back on your thing about mental illness, by the way, because you were saying that grief is not natural and normal and not a mental illness.
Well, no, I didn't say that. The professor.
So I would agree that grieving and all the rest of it, that's a normal emotion. But what happens often is that grieving is suppressed.
Yeah.
And when it's suppressed and not dealt with properly, that's when it becomes something that's problematic. And that's why I think...
particularly in men.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that this kind of conversation is healthy and normal and should be encouraged.
What was interesting, I thought, of all of this was the two princes saying how little they'd talked about it together over the years. It was almost as if it had been put aside. And I suspect for them, this is quite a profound moment.
Yeah.
That they actually can say, this was our mother, this is what we remember, this is how much we love, this is what we think of her.
Yes.
And now we can move on.
If you're a royal supporter, though, then the family is in great hands, isn't it?
Yes,
the family
it
is in
is.
great hands with them.
Anyway, it's me next. Jeremy wants out of the single market. Well, he does now, anyway. Chuka wants to stay in the single market, at least for a long transitional period. Barry wants out of the single market and the customs union. At least that's what he said on Monday. Now, Carol and Michelle, I know that you think it's boring when I bang on about Brexit. You do as well, Nick. But this is the final week, and I just couldn't help myself, because I know Greg is here to support me. The Labour Party is all over the place when it comes to its stance on Brexit, whether we should stay part of the key trade groups. There seems to be a bit of playing the Brexit Wheel of Fortune, selecting policies seemingly at random and seeing how they land. Worst of all, Jeremy Corbyn seems to be willing to follow Theresa May towards a hard Brexit. But the whole purpose of an official opposition is to challenge the government and offer an alternative vision. And since the majority of Labour voters think Brexit is a mistake, the party should speak up for them and put forward a plan for a softer and safer, and dare I say it, smarter Brexit. Oh yes, and that would protect the future of the Labour Party as well as the whole country. Greg, I'm very
June,
happy that you're here.
Well, I'm here, I suspect, to support you.
Yes, please.
But we know that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were always Brexiteers. They always were. They were Brexiteers years ago. If you talk to the Tories, who in those days were quite a small group, who used to vote against everything,
those two were
McDonnell and Corbyn were always in their camp.
Yeah.
What always interests me about the left is that they believe very vehemently in Labour Party policy until it doesn't agree with what they want, and then they can do something else. I mean, someone has got to start making the case for a soft Brexit or even no Brexit.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen in the Labour Party. It's not going to happen in the Labour Party because of the current leadership. And what is weird is you look at who voted for them in the last election, where they got this overwhelming vote amongst younger people who also were overwhelmingly in favour of remaining. And so you've got this strange contradictory position from those people. I hope at some stage, and it's probably one of those times when politics should break up about in traditional basis and say, look, there are people in favour and there are people against.
Yeah.
I still live in hope that we won't go.
Do you think it's possible?
I think it's unlikely, but I can have my...
Yeah,
I can live in
you
hope.
can dream.
I mean, it's interesting, in the polls, there's only about 20% like you and I who still dream that actually something else will happen. But I mean, week after week, month after month, you come across I come across different bits of the economy in academia or in medicine or the rest of it, and they all think it's going to be a disaster.
A disaster. Well, you know, this is why. So back to your point, Greg, about the Labour leadership. Can I finish, please? Back to Greg's very smart point, his salient point about I think the Labour leadership actually has to be in favour of a soft Brexit, because if you look at the statistics, 67% of Labour voters actually think Brexit is a mistake. So therefore, they're not in line with where their party wants to be, where their voters want to be. So it's not about what Jeremy Corbyn wants. Surely it should be what...
A soft Brexit will be disastrous. You're talking about something... You want to be still part of the EEA, the
single market
European
and the customs union.
And so you'd have something like a Norwegian model. That will be disastrous.
Why?
We have to pay...
Norway's done well.
Norwegian model. Bloody disaster.
Norway's done quite well out of
We
that
have to
model.
pay a massive fee to be part of that. Our borders remain wide open. We have no control about who comes in. We have to follow EC, European Court of Justice rules, and we don't
know until we start negotiating
and we don't
properly.
have a seat at the table, which means we have even less sovereignty than we have now. This would be a disaster for our country.
Totally disagree with you on that.
And the thing is, the Labour Party are unified. You just don't like it. Corbyn has said clearly we've got to stay in the single market. Also, he has been tougher than he's been tougher than the Tories. He wants to ban the wholesale importation of EU.
The Labour Party are not
workforce.
unified. When that's the whole problem. They
Well,
are
the
all
leader
over
is,
the
so-
place when it comes to Brexit. So I'm going to pick up what Chuka said. So Chuka Umunna, yes.
He's powerful in the Labour Party now.
Chuka Umunna said the overwhelming majority of Labour members think we should be fighting to stay in the single market.
And nobody's listening to Chuka Umunna anymore.
Well,
he's not in cabinet. He's not
want
got
that.
any power.
And then I'm going to...
These percentages.
Because they're true.
Polls are completely... The polls said Hillary
That's what
Clinton would
Greg
win.
said.
The polls said that
You're like
there's no
Corbyn.
point
You
doing
change
them.
your mind when it suits you. You like a poll when it
When have I
supports
quoted a
your
poll?
view.
When have I quoted a
Always.
poll?
What
He
are
always
you
hates
talking
figures. He's
about?
always hated figures.
Okay, so I've got another quote. And this is Barry Gardner, God bless him. He says, Brexit means leaving the single market and the customs union. 52% who voted to leave the EU would consider it a con if Britain was out of Europe but still subservient to its laws and its institutions.
He's completely right.
He's not.
And he
I
gets-
don't
he
see
gets
how
what democracy is all
negotiating a
about
proper
as well.
deal means that we're subservient to the EU.
Would be
Michelle, I'm
subservient
sure
to the
you've
EU
got something to say.
if we're Norwegian deal. Anyway,
Go on, Michelle.
I do just find it quite boring when people honestly, I do, when people are just constantly trying to do all these polls and all these opinions, and to me, I get staggered by when people say, oh, the will of the people, the 52%, ignore it, as though it was like a really tiny, incidental thing that people was given an opportunity to choose something and they chose it. I just can't understand why there's so much energy going into trying to unpick it constantly.
No, we're not. We're saying that there are different ways to do that deal, and let's do a deal that's actually good for Britain.
But hang on, who said also,
yeah, back to
who
you.
said, I mean, on the night of the referendum, who said this fight will go on because he thought he was going to lose?
I know you
Farage.
But you,
yes.
So, I mean, I love the way that side, the people on that side of the argument, were willing to go on and carry on the fight until they'd won. And then suddenly, no one must carry on the fight.
Yeah, but we're already selling out. But this transitional deal, we've learned this week that all the ministers who were for leaving the single market, they're now all latched onto. This will mean that our borders will remain uncontrolled until 2021. That's not what people voted for, John. A lot of people went out to vote in that referendum because they didn't like the fact that we had uncontrolled immigration. Now we're finding it'll be 5 more years, before we can even begin to control. That's not what people voted for.
Well, even then, the control is going to... I mean, I live in London, as most of you do. You look around London, you think, what is London going to be like if you haven't got migrants?
Yeah.
What are the big cities going to be like if you haven't got migrants? So you're going to have a system that allows people to come in for work, because otherwise half of what London is will disappear.
Until we train local talent to be able to pick up the slack. But that's going to take time. That doesn't happen overnight.
Well, they've got a few
years
to do
what business is supposed to do.
No, but it's also assuming that local talent wants to be trained to go into those industries.
There you go.
And if you're involved in the hotel business or the restaurant business, actually that's not the case.
No. But no one's talking about stopping immigration. We're talking about
controlling
it.
That's what you just said.
No, I didn't. I always use the word control. We're talking about controlling it. And it's incredible this transitional deal has been done at a time now when Italy is in crisis. 85,000 migrants so far this year, predicted 250,000 by the end of the year. That is unsustainable, and it will be unsustainable for us too.
But June, in your intro, you said something along the lines of you want somebody to step forward and provide this alternative to Brexit. But I thought that's what the Lib Dems was doing in the election, and they didn't really get anywhere.
Well, that's not my point. My point is...
Well, I'd like you to answer, Michelle. I put it to you, if you would kindly answer Council's point.
No, if that's not my point.
Well, the Lib Dems stood on
That's
Lib
not
Dems
the point
and they had a
I'm
shocking
making.
night.
But you were saying you wanted someone to basically stand up on that ticket and give them the opportunity, give us the opportunity to counter Brexit, and I thought that's what the Lib Dems did, and no one chose it.
Well, because it came from the Lib Dems. I don't think some people chose it.
Well, not many.
And also that's because it came from the Lib Dems. I'm talking about the fact that 67% of Labour supporters think that Brexit is a bad idea and definitely want a sensible
week, according
Brexit
to a particular
and want
poll.
a sensible Brexit. So the leadership should reflect that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, while I sense that this is a conversation that will go on and on, unfortunately, what we're turning to now will not. It's a story that's gone global, and from which virtually no one emerges with any credit, with the extraordinary and the sometimes inexorably pitiful exception of his remarkable parents. It would seem just about everyone else involved with Charlie Gard has failed to deliver. Why did the world-renowned and quite brilliant Great Ormond Street Hospital seem to lose the trust of the parents and of most of the observers, and hire a legal team that was described by one seasoned newspaper correspondent as, quotes, unnecessarily confrontational when they confronted the mother in court? What drove the American doctor who promised so much and yet delivered so little to act in the way he did? In court, the hospital claimed he hadn't fully read the case notes for weeks and had a financial interest in the drug he appeared to be peddling. When was it ever deemed right that a clearly distraught father and mother had to perform in front of camera and in court in this way? The warrior, Charlie Gard, is unlikely to be alive to see his birthday next Friday. How about his legacy is that any future case like this is handled far, far more considerately?
Nick, I've got to do this because it was mentioned in your opening. This is a quote from Dr. Michiel Hirono. He says, As I disclosed in court on July the 13th, I have relinquished and have no financial interest in the treatment being developed for Charlie's condition. Unfortunately, an MRI scan of Charlie's muscle tissue conducted in the past week has revealed that it's very unlikely that he would benefit from this treatment.
Yeah. Of course. I'm glad you got that out there.
Yeah, no,
but to the central point, it seems to me no one emerges with any credit apart from mum and dad.
And you're totally right, and I agree with everything you said. The American doctor, who I heard an interview with last week, screaming and shouting on the phone, saying Charlie would have been riding around on a bike by now. I mean, that's terrible for the parents to hear, because he doesn't know that for sure. And, you know, that reverend who came over, remember him shouting his head off and whatever. None of them, and even the people outside the court shouting and screaming, have not done his parents any favours at all. But where I kind of might disagree with, but, you know, there was the story this week, should he be allowed to die at home? And then I read that the hospital had said that they couldn't get the ventilator through the front door. My first reaction is, well, you know, knock the bloody door down.
I know. You'd
and
have builders
it
round
after.
in half an hour to put it back up.
However, what I don't know, and what many of us don't know, is that if Charlie came home with a ventilator, how is it going to be removed? What process is it going to take? And when it is removed, is he going to have convulsions? Is he going to be in distress? Is there going to be any pain? And while I don't know much, the one thing I do know is that this little baby has to have a good death. He has to slip away painlessly and peacefully, and we don't know whether that would be possible if he was at home, and that's the only thing that matters.
Greg, you've been in and around newsrooms and journalism even longer than I have. You will absolutely balk at the idea of holding meetings in camera or private sessions. Is there an argument that all of this, we should never have known any of this? It shouldn't have been an open court. It should have been in a closed family session, and then at the social media, and as Carol rightly says, almost the witch hunt that started issuing death threats to Great Ormond Street. Greg, that would never have happened.
No, I think there's an argument for that. I think you're right. I think this... I mean, I have my concerns about the American doctor, because it does seem to me that, you know, he's got some ideas about something that might just... Actually, I don't think anyone believes that treatment would have saved his child. And I've not seen any evidence that suggested... Well, you understand Mum and Dad, but those of us who are parents, you know that.
No,
you know you would do everything you could
trade a limb
to hang on to the life of your child.
It has to be said that American doctor, when he said in court, he actually said this in court. He said that he believed he could have helped Charlie. He said that without ever having seen his brain scans, without ever having seen.
So should it be held in private?
You know, in this case, but the danger of that, Nick, is that the establishment plays dirty tricks sometimes. They keep things from us that we ought to know, and we've seen it many times in cases, child abuse cases, that we don't know the truth. And that's not that this is that, but you know, that's the danger of it. You know, you hide one thing, you hide other stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
But the thing about...
But we do certain things in camera, don't we? For that very reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I tend to agree with you that in this case, what was the upside of this being in the public arena?
There's no upside. Well, for the life of me, I can't see an upside. June?
Nick, I agree with you. The parents are the only ones that came across properly here, and then we have a clip of them.
Oh, right.
The American and Italian team were still willing to treat Charlie after seeing both his recent brain MRI and EEG performed last week. But there is one simple reason why treatment cannot now go ahead, and that is time. A whole lot of time has been wasted. We are now in July, and our poor boy has been left to just lie in hospital for months without any treatment, whilst lengthy court battles have been fought. Tragically, having had Charlie's medical notes reviewed by independent experts, we now know, had Charlie been given the treatment sooner, he would have had the potential to be a normal, healthy little boy.
I mean, for me, I've always felt that the decision should have been given to the parents. That's what I felt.
The decision as regards treatment?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, I understand and completely sympathise with them in what they're saying there, but nobody does know whether or not that treatment would have worked. But I've never understood why they weren't allowed to try.
No.
I never got that.
And doctors are brilliant, and there will be people watching this whose children's lives and whose lives have been saved by Great Ormond Street. But like the case of Aisha King down in Southampton, they were runaways, they were fugitives on the run, and the little boy survived.
Fine, yeah.
Michelle.
I just think it's really sad, and I think you can't watch that clip of that statement and the parents and imagine what they must be going through. It must be so horrible. And I always found it quite surprising that there was no legal aid made available to the parents to try and fight this case and help them. And I don't know why was the decision made to hold all of this in public? Do you know, in the courts? Was that
Why?
just because, yeah?
Because it wasn't done under a family order, so simple as that. That's why. And then also, and I was going to bring you in this on as well. So that's then, and then you had the extraordinary role that social media played in this story, which, and I think, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Judge Francis. He's the judge who has to make decisions. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes for all the whatever in China. But I think at times he perhaps needed to be more direct with some of his judgments and his views. But where I absolutely agree with him, he said that the social media has been, he would put it fine, disaster in this case, with uninformed people.
The treatment of the hospital by some members of the public has been disgraceful.
I mean, you do feel, don't you, that some sort of mediation, a closer discussion between all those involved might have helped.
But they couldn't even mediate over where the lad was to go, could they?
No, the parents didn't want that. But you know, I think the lifelong burden that these parents have to bear now, because they always believed that this drug would help them. You know, it's hard enough to cope with the death of a child when you know everything has been done. When you believe it hasn't been done, it's impossible to come to terms with it.
And when the decision was taken out of your hands. I just didn't get it. I still don't get it now.
Because I think what the courts have said all the way along, hasn't it? Everything that has been done and everything that will be done is about this baby. It's not about what the parents feel, although, you know, many argue it should be, but it's about what's best for Charlie. And I think this, Mr. Justice Francis has said it's
desperately sad.
Well, let's move on. It's a difficult subject to move on from, but it's me next, and I'll explain why I think Thatcher & Co. might finally be consigned to history. For 40 years, this country has followed a Thatcherite approach to capitalism. As a result, industries have closed, large British companies have been sold overseas, and huge disparities have grown up between the rich and the poor, between different parts of the United Kingdom. But now Mrs. Thatcher's free market, on-your-bike approach to capitalism is being challenged. And not only from the prospect of the Corbynistas coming to power after the next election. It has come under attack from the new face of the Tory party, their leader in Scotland, Ruth Davidson. Now, she was virtually the only leading Tory to come out of the election with any credit. And now she has launched a campaign which will be a massive challenge for traditional Tories. She says capitalism has had some big successes, but people are clearly losing faith in its ability to make their lives better, and so it needs a reboot. Now, I've never voted Tory, but if Ruth Davidson could seriously come up with viable policies to counter these concerns, I could support her. Mind you, she might find out she's in the wrong party long before then.
Greg, you sort of said my argument there before I even had the chance to sort of counter what your original argument was. I love Ruth Davidson and I love her politics, and I think she's such a breath of fresh air on the political arena. Problem is, she's in the wrong party. I do not think she can get that agenda through with the Tories. There are far too many powerful, extreme right backbenchers who would make sure this sort of economics didn't get through.
Well, I think it's worth me
also,
just
she
for
can't
1 minute.
become a leader of the party because she doesn't have a seat.
But let me just, for 1 minute, explain a bit more of what she said, because I do think it's quite profound. She says, how does a teenager living in a pit town with no pit, a steel town with no steel, or a factory town with no factory see capitalism working for them?
Yep.
She goes on, is the only route for social advancement a degree, student debt, and then moving to London, knowing there is precisely zero chance of saving enough to ever own their own front door? Or is it staying put in a community that feels like it's being hollowed out from the inside, with a high street marked by the repetitive studding of charity shop, pub, bookies, and empty lot? Now, she captured something there that we've all seen. She's captured something. The question is, what do you do about it? How will she do it? But at least it's somebody who's saying, look, this is the real problem. The real problem that we've got two Britons. And they're often a city and a town apart.
She wants to...
And the divide is growing.
That piece that I read, it's like she wants to reboot capitalism in the same way Blair rebooted socialism, and it really resonated with me when she said that.
Keynesian economics, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really resonated when she was talking about the rise of Corbyn here and Trump in America, and she said it's totally understandable because it is born out of poverty and despair and hopelessness and a feeling of injustice. And it just reminded me, the only thing that Trump said during his campaign that resonated with me was he talked about the rusted out factories scattered like tombstones. Now that's because, globalisation took those factories and put them somewhere else, cheaper labour, whatever. And we know that has happened here. And I just think that this is fantastic. She's, capitalism currently makes individuals rich and keeps workers poor. She's talking about doing the opposite of that, taking some of the profits of capitalism and put it into society and sharing the wealth. It's a great.
She's also talking about a bigger role for government.
She is.
She is saying, look, government has got to intervene, but we've had 40 years, basically, of Labour and Tory who didn't intervene. And look what we've ended up with.
Greg,
government will have to intervene.
What she's talking about is Keynesian economics. We agree with her. We love her. But I'm just saying she's in the wrong party. It's not going to get through with the Tories.
Right.
It's going to burst.
Right. Now, June, you talk about the extreme right backbenchers within the Conservative Party. What do you mean extreme right? They're not extreme right as you mean.
They're very right. I don't think Jacob Rees-Mogg would go for this.
Queen Ruth of Scotland gave a great speech. No question about it. But it is, in a sense, what you'd expect to hear from Jeremy Corbyn. Let's be honest about it. There's no solutions.
That's why
There's no solutions. There's just... And it very nicely written, no question about it, nicely compared by Carol. The reality is, I love capitalism. Capitalism works. The desk we're sitting at, the clothes you're wearing, the microphones that are here, the camera over there, everything absolutely works. Could it be improved? Yes, of course it could be improved. Should we share it around a little bit more? Yes, we probably should. But it is ridiculous to say that capitalism is over because the taxes are paying for the hospitals that are treating the people who are sick and watching on television now.
She's in favour of capitalism. She actually says she's in favour of people enriching themselves, but not in the way that bankers do, and not in the way that the big corporations do.
We should be bloody grateful for the bankers. The bankers are the people of the fluid and the oil that will grease the machine and get this economy.
Not the size of their bonuses.
But you go... I mean, I was recently in South Wales and went to some of the old pit towns.
Right.
And it's a tragedy. They're terrible.
It's a tragedy.
And I'm sure that that's replicated all over the country.
But where was the solution, Greg? I know it's a tragedy.
No, I agree with you there. But that's... And it's a difficult... I mean, there isn't an instant solution. There clearly isn't. But it's interesting that someone in the Conservative Party is actually identifying
Last point, we must get Michelle. How is that different from the famous Just About Managing speech? When Theresa May says, I want to be there for the just about... She's actually managed to turn just about managing into a mantra, into a lifestyle. She's just about managing herself now. No, but it's exactly the same.
She talked about conservatism for all.
Yes, it's the same.
But there have been no policies to reflect that. And I think the difference is that Ruth Davidson would actually bring about policies.
Yes.
Well, Sarah, I find this 5th out of 7, by the way. just to set that... I'll beat UKIP.
You beat the Monster Looney... The raving Monster Looney Party.
They weren't even standing.
Oh, thank God, you'd have been 6th.
By the way, it's 5th more than you lot have ever. So if you don't mind...
It's not true. I once stood the GLC in Putney and I stood for the Labour Party and I turned a very good Labour seat into a very strong Tory.
Anyway, coming back to the topic in hand. So I found this speech fascinating and I feel like she reflects various situations very well. It's an interesting speech and I think a lot of people should read it. But to a few people's points, first of all, there are no solutions. Second of all, she talks about pit towns. So I was saying before, my nana was from Wattstown in Wales, in the Rhondda Valleys. And when you go there, it's not a thriving place for a young person to live and to be. And as I've mentioned before, I'm from Hull. I had to leave Hull for work. I had to get on my bike and find work in various different places. And Hull was never the same, has never been the same since it lost its fishing industry. Yeah. So I know what those towns are like. But a few things that I'd say is, when Ruth is a very strong Remainer, and when I think of, for example, the steel industries, where when steel industries have collapsed some of the factories, they've lost a lot of jobs. We couldn't intervene in those industries, one of the reasons being EU regulation. So I find this quite interesting that someone that's very strongly wants to stay within the EU is also arguing for UK government intervention, because to me those two are at odds with each other. That's the first point. The second point I want to make is she talks a lot about people, if you're, working in a city and you've lost your industry, do you have to get onto your bike to another city? You could be entrepreneurial. you could create another job for yourself, or a job for yourself, or an industry for yourself.
Not everybody
No, of course not everybody is, but entrepreneurs at the moment, they gravitate towards places like London. So a lot of the new job creations and all the rest of it happens in these kind of metropolitan cities.
They're not going to the Rhondda Valley then, Michelle, are
Well,
they?
that's
They're
her
not going to
point,
the Rhondda
though.
Valley
Isn't
at the
that her
moment.
point? We need to create an environment where businesses will thrive in places like the Rhondda Valley. So entrepreneurs would be attracted to those places.
Historically, you did that with public money.
Yeah.
You actually spent public money to try to build an industry in a particular area. Now, you could argue, well, that as soon as that, and I think there's some evidence for this, as soon as that money went away, the industries disappeared. And that therefore they were being... But, you know, that is the sort of discussion we're going to have in the future.
Yeah. But industries change as well, don't they? So as a government, I guess what you need to have is a very clear industrial strategy. What industry is strategically important to this country going forward? I would argue...
And where do we place them?
Exactly.
Around
I mean, that's part of the argument of why Corbyn doesn't believe in the EU, because he thinks that actually you needed to do more intervention in this society, and the EU stopped you doing it. What she says in this, in this speech is, this can't be done on a national basis, it's got to be done internationally. So in other words, it would have had to have been an agreement within the EU. And let's not kid ourselves, they're all suffering from the same thing.
We're all suffering from it. This is happening in America, it's happening throughout the West. So actually she's right. It's got to be a collective approach.
She's also addressing how we see capitalism. Currently, capitalism exploits the working classes. That's why they despise it, because there's nothing in it.
The current form of capitalism. You can have inclusive capitalism.
Which is why, I know, but the current form that we have now, and it's why the working classes despise it, because there's nothing in it for them.
There isn't.
So we have to make it so that they do get something out of capitalism. They do get some of its rewards.
Right, anyway, brace yourself, everybody.
Your face for Rory. He's twisting his face.
I'm going to be showing you some pictures of me unairbrushed next.
Finishing seventh.
Earlier this week, I was lucky enough to do a photo shoot for the cover of a magazine. It was a glamorous affair, makeup, hairdressers and rows of beautiful dresses and shoes. I posted some unedited behind-the-scenes pictures on my social media, and I was shocked when the mum to an impressionable young girl responded to tell me that I need to eat, and apparently my image was not cool. Girls and boys are now growing up permanently surrounded by images of the perfect body and life. But more often than not, these photographs are edited. But more often than not, the kids don't realise that as they strive to achieve the impossible perfection. The line between real life and fantasy is getting increasingly blurred. And in France, there are proposals to make it mandatory to disclose digital enhancements in photographs. And I could not agree more. I don't mind anybody being assisted in looking good, but I do mind when it's deliberately hidden.
Can I just point out, for the benefit of my fellow pledgers, that I note in those two pictures, one, you're waiting at the bar, and the second one, you have a drink in your hand. So we clearly know what sort of pictures they were. Look, you're probably right with this idea in front, but I don't think that you can necessarily lay the blame here at magazines or at newspapers. I would say that even before Vinken de Verde made the first newspaper about 400 years ago, just off Fleet Street, girls always wanted to have a certain shape. Some blokes probably always wanted to have a certain shape. I don't think it's a bad idea,
The Nick Ferrari shape.
Yeah, the Nick Ferrari. Many people like it in great shape. I don't think it's such a bad idea if you have the letter D or something at the bottom of a picture, if you want to show that it's been digitally enhanced.
Yeah.
But if you think that's going to solve the problems, and these are serious problems, and sometimes these are fatal problems, when kiddies take their lives, and not even children, actually, others take their lives, or they slim to ridiculously dangerous, perilous levels, it is not going to cure it all, Michelle. I'll tell you that for nothing. Don't just blame the press.
I don't think it's going to cure it all. But what I think is we're in a situation now where so many people are dishonest about the fact that they're editing things and they're posting things online that have been often significantly edited.
I mean, I understand some people are using these dating sites online. I'm not familiar with them at all, Michelle. But often I don't know whether I don't know whether you are. I've no idea, and it's none of my business. But they don't put up true representations of themselves. They don't put up true descriptions of themselves. They sometimes don't even put true bloody pictures of themselves. So you arrange to meet the person. You sit down in the restaurant. Dear God, who's this person?
Has that happened to you?
I've never. Do you know? I don't know how to.
I
don't know how to. I get enough dates without it done. So there we go.
For full disclosure, I am on on a dating site, and I would
You don't.
definitely not edit my pics.
But as a serious point, I've never understood why the modelling industry, I mean, looks anorexic. Whole lots of people look anorexic. And you think, why? I mean, it must be because, you know, going back to the debate about capitalism, it must be because it sells.
Yeah, it does.
But it's some of the pictures are pretty unpleasant, actually, I think.
No.
And on a serious note, there is growing pressure on young people now to look good, to be popular, to excel academically, to be thin, and you know,
Wasn't it always there, Kat?
Yeah, there is.
No, but it's always been like that.
Well, yeah, but I think I think social media makes it worse.
Okay.
There's a lot of people talk about how you look. But let me finish this one point. Currently, there are 250,000 kids in this country receiving mental health treatment.
For eating disorders.
Yeah, for eating. No, well, just mental health issues generally.
What's a kid 18 and below? Is that?
Yes,
right.
and that is partly down to this expectation for them to look great.
I agree. And I think it's a weird one in the sense that I totally think this is necessary, and this is the debate that's been going on for years, and actually it's the sensible and responsible thing to do. But in a weird way, though, Michelle, I would add that I do think social media has made young people quite sophisticated in knowing the effects of filters and airbrushing because they're now able to do it themselves on their phones. So unlike, let's say, when we were growing up, where you did believe those images were real, now I do think a lot of young people know that they're not. So I agree, we need the sort of marker that points it out, but I think the bigger issue here is as a society, we need to relook at our obsession with youth and thinness and slimming and all the things that we're obsessed with in the West. You know, my family are from Ghana, and the ideal figure in Ghana is a curvy woman. So we don't have the same issues around eating disorders in the same way because all bigger sizes are celebrated, and I think that's what we need to look at.
I'm going to Ghana.
Girl, you'd be the hottest thing ever in Ghana. There's a slew of Ghanaian men lining up.
I remember being in Africa with my wife and the projects we do there, and they gave her this enormous plate full of food, of which she ate about a third. And the woman next to her said, "You're clearly not an African." And the whole thing. I ate a lot.
She's probably my mum.
But it's just about, I just think, be transparent, because I see too many people that have had, in my eyes, clearly had some work done, sitting on TV going, yeah, I've never had any work done, I just look like this naturally. No, I haven't edited that picture, I just look that naturally. No, I haven't borrowed this dress, it's mine, I've spent all this money on it. Yes, I am definitely on this holiday, whilst actually you're not, you just put yourself into that shot. And I just think, be transparent. Sometimes you look good, sometimes you look less good. You know, sometimes you're bigger and smaller, and it's all right.
But nobody's going to put a picture out of them looking rough.
No.
People just don't do that. None of us. We all put out pictures that other people think we're rough, and we think we're the good one.
I'm still waiting for a picture of me that isn't rough. If anyone's found one, please send it to the Pledge, care of Sky News.
When we were interviewing people in those not so in the distant past, I don't think I ever met a celebrity that I recognised because you walk into the room and you go, "Oh, you!" There's no resemblance to any of the pictures we've seen. But yet, kids are aspiring to be like them. Kids are trying to be.
Well,
like
kids
them.
are doing it themselves on their phones, Carol. They now can. You know, all of the apps and stuff have
So
filters.
is the impact of social media totally negative, or are there some positives?
This is my point. I think it's negative in that we're now living in an age where people are obsessed with posting pictures, but it's positive because they know that actually those images aren't real. In that sense.
Do you think that they do?
I think they do.
I see people posting stuff that in my head is clearly a sponsored post, i.e. they're being paid to advertise something. And they're not disclosing that. They should be, but they're not always disclosing that.
But that's not what you're talking about here.
No,
you're talking about unattainable images. That's what you're talking about here, not promoting products.
No, I'm talking about, to your point, that actually people are social media savvy and can actually see through things that have been altered, edited,
I think
promoted.
they are when it comes to images. I think because now a 16-year-old girl knows that if she puts whatever filter on her picture, it makes her look better than the picture without the filter. It just does. So therefore, she's much more sophisticated than, let's say, somebody 20, 15 years ago.
You're going to have to show me how to do this.
I was just about to say, once we finish, I'm going to have a word with you. I'm going to teach you how to look good in your photographs, Nick.
I hope you've got a lot of time on your hands, I tell you.
I'll try.
Won't be
We'll break it
quick.
into sections. OK, time for the last straight talker of the series. Who out there really has been putting things to rights this week? Well, he had big boots to fill, but President Trump's new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, certainly seems to be getting down to business. In fact, when he was asked how he's going to deal with all of the leaks, he reportedly said this: "I'm just going to fire everybody. That's how." Now, whether you agree with his approach or not, and I'm guessing that you don't, it's certainly direct. And for that, Mr. Scaramucci, you are this week's straight talker. I have to say, though, I also like the way he signed off his first press conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, panel, do you reckon this guy is going to be any better than poor old Sean?
I think he's going to get a few lawsuits. That's what he's going to get. Yeah, good luck with that.
He might get an offer to play the next Superman, don't you think? He looks a bit like him.
I'm intrigued that we've actually come through a pledge. The first time I think ever that we haven't played the Trump card. It's very kind that June has actually dressed in appropriate colours.
Yeah, I'm in solidarity to the people of America.
As we are getting ready to go on our summer holidays or whatever we might be doing, how's Trump been for you?
Awful.
Why?
Well, look, he's just banned transgender people from the military. Insane.
OK.
Can't wait for it to be over.
How's Trump been for you?
Well, it depends from what perspective. You say, is it entertaining? Yes. Yeah, it's unbelievably entertaining. As a journalist, it's wonderful.
Yes, it is.
But as the leader of the free world...
Carol Malone?
I think he's incredibly entertaining, and the White House will be a very dull place now when he goes. But he's not actually doing much for America.
No. I mean, I think, to your point, to tweet the ban, which is wrong anyway, and to say because of advice from my military
but they denied
and the Pentagon
it.
just referred all the calls to the right. I thought that was pretty grim.
Yep.
Michelle, how's he been for you?
Well, he's certainly been unpredictable, hasn't he? You just can't make it up half the time. When you see some of the stuff that he's writing and doing, it is, even for me, and it's kind of, I'm looking at it going...
Yeah. So
okay.
what about just as Ivanka?
I came in solidarity with Americans because I feel their pain right now.
Okay.
What about you, Nick? What's it?
You're right. Tremendously entertaining. Has given me so much for the radio station, but at times actually quite worrying and quite disturbing. And I will use the example. You can't... I don't think any military expert has said... In fact, military experts are kind of indicating exactly the opposite. Yes. If you're fit enough, and if you're able, and if you're patriotic, and if you're committed, and if you're brave enough to go to war for the US, and you're in the military, and they could have as many as 6,000 of these transgender... I just don't get the problem.
And it's working. There isn't a problem
I just don't get
the
the
moment.
problem. Yeah.
Right, well, that's it for this week, and indeed Series 4 of The Pledge.
Aww.
I might have mentioned it, but I'm definitely available for dates. Goodbye!